Well, hello, and thanks for joining me here on another episode of Chasing Shadows with me, Dave Tarrant. And today you find me up on the River Thames, and we're going to be doing a bit of roving for chub.
So what do I mean by roving? Well, using one rod, fishing individual swims, and what I like to do is to find some nice looking swims that might have some slack areas and some creases in the main flow of the river. Pre-bait a few swims up with about sort of 5 or 6 small balls of cheese paste and work my way up the river, doing about 5 or 6 swims for an evening sort of session. I like to try and fish as light as I can, bring in as little gear as I can, so just fishing the one rod. I do sort of bring a chair because that sort of holds my sort of unhooking mat in there. If I could get away with it, I wouldn't bring it, but I do like my creature comforts. And like I say, it is a matter of just sort of finding out those sort of lovely little sort of quirky swims that gives you a feeling that you know there's going to be a fish sort of in those swims. And like I say, I'll pre-bait those swims and I leave those swims for about sort of half an hour. So I've gone up the river and then I'll go back, maybe the last swim, I'll have a cup of tea and leave that one, and then I'll start working my way back, sort of giving each swim about sort of 30 to 45 minutes per swim to see if there's a fish in the swims. So, you know, after I've pre-baited them, if there's a fish in there and it's sort of been taken a bait, it gives it confidence, and usually you'll sort of get a fish straight away. So the rod I like to use a 12-foot quiver tip rod with a 1.5 ounce quiver tip. Really like, because you know I'm looking out for those really sort of little bites. Sometimes you get the sort of small bites, especially in the depth of winter if the fish are being a little bit picky, and then I'll go down on size on the size of the cheese paste that I've got on the hook. But we're in November now, it's still quite mild, so I'm going to use quite a big old lump of cheese paste on the hook. And like I say, I'll sit there and watch for the little plucks, but I'm expecting sort of real pull rounds at the moment. The chub are still a bit sort of hungry at the moment. And then down to the reel, I've got a fight and drag reel there, that's in the 4,000 size, and that's loaded up with mainline of 6-pound breaking strain. Then going down to the business end, so we've got a little run bead there, as you see. I've got a little boom on there, and I've got myself a little cage feeder. It's quite a small one, that's a 15-gram cage feeder, very small. I don't want to introduce too much bait, I just don't want to overfeed these chub, just giving them a little bit, sort of little and often. So we've got a very free running run bead there. And what I do is I tie a little loop there, and I suspend the cage feeder onto that, and I can change it over and put some swan shot on there if I don't want to introduce a bait. If I've been putting a lot of bait into a swim, I'll sort of hold off and then just sort of fish that with a couple of swan shot on there, a bit like a link ledger. So going down there, we got a little buffer bead that just protects the swivel there, and then we've got a little tail rubber which kicks the line away there, going down to about 15, maybe actually there's about 20 inches of fluorocarbon. That's in 6-pound fluorocarbon there, going down to a number 6 big old wide gate wide gate hook, and you know I'm sort of fond of those. I'm going to put a big old lump of cheese paste on there. Now bait wise, I have got cheese paste and I have got some little barrels of red Leicester, and I'll fish that on the hair rig rather than straight on the hook. But like I say, to get going, I'm going to be using some liquidized bread in the feeder, and I'm going to be putting a bit of cheese paste on there, and I'm going to sort of hunt around in those swims and see if we can catch a nice chub for the camera today.
So the first swim of the day's got a lovely crease, a lovely glide coming down here, a little bit of flow coming down to some overhanging bushes, an ideal place where a chub would be residing. So it didn't take long for Mr. Robin to come looking for a little bit of spare bait. So I gave Mr. Robin 2 large handfuls of that liquidised bread. I like to feed the wildlife in the winter. It can be harsh at times for them.
Come on, Trouble. Leave him alone. He doesn't need you.
So is he eating,
a bit of free food, is it?
eating the Robin's food?
Wait, get out of there. Come on. Keeping the place tidy. That's all she's doing.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I don't mind sharing the bait with the dogs.
She's saving the kitchen, you know.
So the liquidised bread, what I like to do is I like to keep back about 3/4 of a loaf of bread and put that through the liquidiser and really sort of liquidise that quite fine. And then I like to leave that for a few days because it can be sort of stodgy if you use it straight away, and it sort of tends to stay in the feeder. So, you know, this bread now is about sort of 3 days old. And inside that, you'll see a few flecks of the orange, which is the red Leicester, which are sort of a bit of a byproduct of making those little barrels for the hook. And I've also introduced a few sort of granules of garlic in there to just give that a little bit more pulling power. So cheese paste versus the red Leicester barrels. When do I tend to sort of use one over the other? Well, you know, in really sort of cloudy conditions, and when the river's carrying a bit of colour, I sort of do tend to like to use a cheese paste, which I just feel is a little bit more natural and it sort of releases the smells. It's got good pulling power, and however, the downside of that is if there's crays around, they will absolutely demolish that and it won't stay on the hook for long. And then that's when I like to use the barrels, and this is quite hard, this sort of red Leicester, and I like to fish that on a hair rig, and it gives you confidence, you know, that can stay, you could keep that out in the river for a good few hours, and however, the crays will like it, but it's a little bit more tolerant to them. Right, going back to my hook choice, you know I absolutely love these Corder wide gapes in the size 6 for the cheese paste. It's got a good size wire, good strong, and it's also got an in-turned hook point, which I like, because especially when I'm using the cheese paste, I like to expose the point of the hook, and that's going over sort of debris bits of wood, and it wears down after a while. And then what I like to do is I like to sort of file them. I do sharpen my hooks, a bit like a lot of carp anglers, they do get blunt, and not because I'm tight, I just like, you know, if you've been waiting a few hours for a bite and that, you want that hook to work as best it's going to and be really, really sharp.
So I've been sat in this swim now for over half an hour without a bite. Seeing that boat going downstream has made me think it's time for a move. Time to move down to number 2 swim, the one that I pre-baited earlier. It's been about an hour and a half now, so if there was any chub in there, I'm sure they've got pretty confident eating those freebies. So, swim number 2. Let's hope this is a better swim. It's quite an open swim. It's got some nice creases down the side there, leading down to some overhanging bushes, some newly felled trees. I'm sure it's a good spot for a chub to be hiding out, waiting for some nice morsels of food. Hopefully some cheese paste. So time's getting on now. We're about 3 o'clock. Temperatures are starting to drop, and there has been a slight change in the light levels. So hopefully we can catch ourselves a chub before we lose the light. So just to the right of me is a lovely crease. That's leading down to those overhanging bushes. An ideal place for a chub to hide. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cast my line about a metre off of there and see if we can catch a chub off of that point. Otherwise Mr. Impatience will be moving to swim number 3. What I like to do is to dip the cheese paste in the river just before casting out. What this does is it brings the core temperature of the cheese paste down, because sometimes it can get a little bit warm, especially if it's been in my pocket or in my bait bucket. And what it does do is it makes it a lot more resilient for casting out. Now that the rod's out, it's time to sit back, relax and have a nice cup of tea. Whilst listening to the overhead whop whop of the Army's Chinooks low. So it's been a difficult day and I go and get a bite. And what do I go and do? I miss it. Now I've been getting a few taps. I think there's a few small chublet moved into the swim. It's getting to that time of the evening. We're starting to lose a little bit light and it is getting a little bit cold. So I think I'll have one more cast in this swim and then I'm going to think about moving down to the last swim and settling in there for the evening.
Oh wow, finally, after a lot of work, we've managed to catch I think it's a chub, feels chubby. I missed a few bites, God knows why. And it's about 8 o'clock. So, yes. Not sure, I don't think it's that big. There's a chub. Oh, I don't know, that looks quite nice. Oh, and she's in the net. Well, that was a long time coming. Long time coming. Right. Wow. There we go. So we've been fishing a long time for one bite, but still fishing that cheese paste. And I still fished the mashed bread in the evening, and it's resulted in a nice chub. Right. Let's get myself sorted and get it weighed, and I'll show it to the camera. Well, she's nicely rested, and there we go. We won't weigh her. I think it's about £5 of lovely Thames chub, caught on that cheese paste, that link ledger cage feeder with the liquidised bread. And it's been a tough day today. Very finicky bites, and but we got there in the end. And I hope you've enjoyed the video today. It just shows you how I go about roving. We've had to go into darkness to catch this one, so I hope you enjoyed the video, and please subscribe, and I'll catch you back on the bank with me, Dave Tarrant, chasing shadows again.